Okay, we're starting. Good morning. I am Cynthia Tom, and I wanted to share a lesson. God, okay, so start. Take one. Hi, I'm Cynthia Tom, and I am streaming a kind of a lesson that came from my healing, and I wanted to share with you where I took a lesson I got with Steve Nobel. I had an in-person session with him, and I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to show you slides from that time. So let me get the video up. So I wanted to share with you a session I had with Steve Nobel, and then where my creative brain took it, and hope that it might help others. And the key is, first of all, I've been following Steve Nobel. He has amazing YouTube videos as meditations, and I've been following him for probably over 2 years. And I found out about him through a woman, Amy Lamb, who is a shaman that I work with, because I've been going through a lot of intense healing over the last 2 years, recovering from what I've been told is a concussed brain. So I'm getting better. But I just wanted to share this with you. I'm not sure what to do with it, but it turned out to be, I think, brilliant on Steve Nobel's part. So what he ended up doing with me, and I've never heard anybody else do this before, but he had me imagine myself walking through in a landscape of my imagination into a structure of my imagination, which happened to be a giant French chateau or apartment building. And we went with the idea was to go to different rooms in this building and imagine the doorways and imagine these, and it was these 7 rooms. It was my father and my mother's ancestral line, my health room, room of vows, romantic relationships, the work room, and the angelic healing room. And each one of these, I'll show you what came up as best as I can represent what was in my head. But he did have me walk through there, and he asked me to bring someone along, and I brought a guardian angel, Janet King, who passed a couple of years ago, who was someone that I was hoping would become a dear friend, and I hope she is now, but she's passed from this planet. Anyway, he asked me to imagine the doorways, and there were always those huge French doors. And he asked me what I saw upon entering the room. And then it became an exercise of redesigning or redecorating the room. And I used a process called soul collage or INTUIT cards to imagine what the rooms would be like. So to heal them and heal my stories. And I found out that doing it this way and with my visual imagination was a way for me to begin to rewrite the stories that I carried with me for a long time around my family, my beliefs, just things that I did in my youth. When you're young, you come up with coping mechanisms for something you don't quite understand. And if you stay unconscious about it and they give you triggers, and certain situations happen, you get triggered, or you feel chronic heartache and you don't know why, this might be a way to go inside that and shift your stories and shift those beliefs when you finally put your finger on what they are. So what I used for each of the rooms that we went through is to redecorate it. I call it INTUIT Cards, and it's based on soul collage, and which is a process that started in 1988. But it's basically using, for me, 5x7 cards and then gluing images on top. So it's a collage. It's not necessarily an art collage. It's just a way of putting images together and then letting them speak to you. So for the first room, Steve brought me into my mother's ancestral line room. And this is a quick depiction I was able to make with some painting. But when I walked in the room, it was this beautiful, the whole room, including the light, was this beautiful blue room, like peacock blue. It was very wet inside. The floor, everything was wet. And then I noticed that the walls were kind of swollen and they were crying. So the walls were crying. And the interesting thing is, it didn't upset me, partly probably because of the grounding that Steve Nobel was holding me with, but also I've done so much healing my whole life, but in the last 2 years in particular, since I couldn't really go out, I couldn't read or write without getting really dizzy. So I had to sit with myself for 2 years. It's still going on, but it's nowhere near. I'm getting much better and recovering from it. But it ended up being a gift because it's happening on top of the pandemic. So a lot of people were staying in, and I just chose to listen to, I don't know, the awareness that comes from sitting with yourself. So anyway, I was in this room and there was a lot of crying, and Steve took me around the room and said, let's create windows to dry out the room. And then he asked if I wanted to redesign it, paint the room, do something. And I said, I needed time. And and what I did after my session with him is I started picking, remember, these are 5x7 cards, and I have about 100 of them I've made over the last few years. And I just blind picked them. I just asked who wants to help me redesign my mother's ancestral line room. And I pulled out 5 cards. And these are the 5 cards I pulled. And I swear, miraculously, the first card I pulled was the only card in that box that I've made for my mother's energy, for her memory. And this was the card. And that told me that it's time to change her story in my memory, because I can. And that helps change the trauma affiliated with it. It's kind of epigenetics. You can actually change your DNA by changing your beliefs and your stories. And so I decided I'm going to be painting this room fuchsia. This was my mother when she was 17, and she was in a tuberculosis sanitarium. But she was spending time away from her, a stressful family situation of poverty, without a father, a single mother, in Chinatown. And this is back in the 30s. And then this is a lotus flower, which is flowers that grow from the mud. They need the mud to grow. The second card I pulled is a silly card. And that reminded me to bring in the silliness that my mom and I had. And it's just helping you remember, even if there weren't happy memories, I'm claiming that there were. But there were happy memories now that I think about it. And I'm going to embrace those versus the ones where I felt hurt or neglected. So that's the second card. The third card was just for me about simplistic beauty and bringing that into the room. And again, if you knew my cards, I don't have that many cards with flowers on them and pink. So it was just lovely to pick these cards, and really surprising. And then this is another card about bringing in the softness. And one thing, my mom was raised in these days it'd be called extreme poverty. And we were raised kind of lower class, lower middle class, I guess, but there wasn't that much money. So vacations, like the dreams of going on vacations, but almost silly vacations, that's that card. And then I pulled this card and it scared me. There's a Chinese headdress in the middle here, and it scared me a little. But then I realized there's probably a reason I pulled this card, which is very different than the other cards. But the one thing with the INTUIT cards, you can put them together and they create different meanings. So I just pulled these cards together, and I realized with silliness, there also has to be some fierceness. And I wanted to reclaim my mother's fierceness, what she was able to find in herself, given her childhood. So then we left that room, and we left the windows open, and we closed the door and moved on to my father's ancestral line room. And when I walked in there, I really tried to I worked to leave my imagination open. And this room was like a jungle, with sounds and the moisture and just a lot of foliage. I have no idea where this is coming from. And when I was telling Steve about this, he said, well, what do we need to do? Should we create windows to dry out the room? And I said, no, the whole wall's coming down like a drawbridge. And I was really pleased that my imagination was just going where it needed to go. So then I started blind pulling cards from my father to redecorate this room. And again, miracle, this is the only card I've made from my father. And I pulled it out of now a box of 95. And this is the one card I made for him while I was in Paris. I'd just gone to the Picasso Museum, and I brought some pictures along with me of just different things because I knew I was going to collage while I was in Paris. So I pulled that card, which my father was an artist, but he never claimed it. But I think now wherever he is an artistic soul. So the next set of cards that I pulled to redecorate this room, again, I don't have that many cards with vegetation on it. And I seem to pull all the ones that inspired by vegetation. So this card told me that there has to be some rich, luxurious comfort going on. And then this one, I don't know what it means yet, but it's a photo I took in Hunters Point Shipyard before they tore these houses down. And Modigliani with a bird, painting of a woman with a bird on her head. So I think there's just some silliness and letting things go out of control, maybe. I'm not sure yet. And then again, another vegetation card. And this one was a photo of Stern Grove in San Francisco that I'd taken years ago and created this soul collage card with that. And I think for me, it's about keeping that sense of wonder, like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and keeping the lights on in your head, in yourself. And then this card, which when I made it, I didn't really think it was that great of a card, but I kept it. So when I pulled this card from my father's ancestral line, my old story immediately came up, that this was my brother and my mother and father. And in a Chinese family, generally, the girls don't mean so much. And I've carried that with me. And I always thought I was an interruption on their trio, because my mom, there was a story my mom would always say right until she passed, that when I was born, she had to give my brother to somebody else to take care of him because she had tuberculosis, or she was weak from it. So the card made me feel kind of bad when I pulled it, but I sat with it. And eventually it said to me that they were sitting around looking at me as a baby, and they were really excited to see a baby girl, because I was a cute baby girl. And I'm now just claiming that too. So after that, I felt like this card told me it's time to change the stories, like surrender to the new stories and allow them to become my reality. And again, changing my DNA through changing my beliefs. So this one, and if this is too much and you want to cut out now, please feel free, but I'm continuing on with the cards. So the next room that Steve brought me to was the relationships, the romantic relationship room. And I'm very single right now. So it was interesting. What I saw when I walked in, no preconceived ideas, was an empty, dusty dungeon. Walking the room, it was just the walls with a couple of those, I don't know if they're called manacles, but they were the rings that you would hang manacles on. But it was very empty. Again, I had no emotional response to it except, oh, a dungeon. And I think it surprised him. But we opened the windows, let the dusty air out, and then I looked forward to whatever I was going to pull for the INTUIT cards for this. So here's the first card I pulled. And again, I don't know completely what the meanings of the cards are, but I'd be interested in meeting the person that's going to fill these shoes someday. I'm very inspired by the cards. The cards are very extreme, I feel. Like I made this while I was in Australia with the Australian landscapes. And I feel like there's really ancient, rich information and a very deep-rooted, grounded person. And this card told me that whatever this romantic relationship energy is, it's with somebody or some people that have that are grounded in really ancient wisdom, kind family wisdom, but very, very light and very attached to their higher consciousness. And then this card is about transformation. I wrote it down because I looked up dragonfly when I made this. Again, this is an Australian landscape. And it's about change, transformation, adaptability, and self-realization. That's the translation of the dragonfly. So I'd be happy to meet people that have this going with them. And then this was a big one to pull. When I made this, I wasn't sure what the meaning was, but in this context of a romantic relationship, it's a person that's a remover of obstacles, patron of the arts. How perfect is that? And with intellect and wisdom. And then this card, it's the final card. To me, it was about community, the light of community and the warmth of community and of the singular attachment to source. So the next one we went on to is about my work space, what I do for a living, what I do as my life's calling, my life path is all one, because I'm a painter and I'm a creator of workshops and lectures and exhibitions. I'm a curator. But we looked at what my workroom looked like, and it was the studio that I own now, pretty much, but empty. I don't have a picture of my studio, empty. And these are the cards I pulled, and I was very inspired by them. And right now, these cards are actually sitting on my shelf as I'm embarking on a new series of workshops that we're about to do that address trauma. So the first card to me, again, I made this in Australia, and it was that there's ancient wisdom and medicine in what I'm doing, and to be secure and solid in that. This one reminded me that I'm here to help women rise and give tools for humanity to rise in consciousness. And this one is based on a mugshot, a painting I did of my grandmother, and just an old building I took a photo of. And this is to remind me that I'm here to help address and bring light to all the trauma in the world, or actually in my community. And this card I made when I was in Paris, and I was, for some reason, really scared. I just felt really frightened, and I don't even know of what. And I went to the Picasso Museum and found this postcard of Picasso's, and put it with the elephant, and it said to me that you're part of an ancient tribe of artists, and it's huge. Like, our numbers are huge, our intention's huge, and it gave me a lot of courage. But right at this time, I was right across the street from Notre Dame burning, so I think that's maybe why I was so nervous. And then this card, when I made it, I thought it was silly, and it's definitely not the kind of artistic kind of card I would make, but I kept it, and I was like, oh, I don't know what this is for. And I tossed it to the side on the table. And right when I could hear it, I swear, and it was just my voice, and I heard it say, we're here to remind you to pull your big girl pants up and just get on with things. Because it was at a time where I wanted someone else to tell me what direction to go in or how to best do things. I needed permission from other people to make the decisions I needed to make. And this card taught me to just make my own decisions and get on with it, because I do know. So I ended up being very grateful for this card. And then the health room. And thank you for still being here if you're still listening. The health room, I could probably sketch it someday, but it was these metal beds that the military used when they were in the chateaus or in just stately houses to put up all the soldiers that were getting hurt in the first two world wars. But I saw them floating around a room. And the picture you see here is actually my mother in a recreation of the barracks in Angel Island in San Francisco Bay, where Chinese women were interned. They were not allowed to just land in San Francisco. For some reason, Chinese were imprisoned on the island and interrogated for a while. My grandmother was there for 3 months before they let her land. So that's the health room I saw. And here's the health room I reimagined. And this is based on a couple paintings of mine, and that's about living in your intuition and trusting it. The second card again is trusting that you are wise, your own wisdom. And then also the lightness and the beauty of trusting your child, and getting back to who you were before you were age 5, before you started having to cope with things, and the joy and beauty in that. And then this is about my maternal grandmother again, and having her surrounded by herons and egrets, and finding delight. And this was just about being bold, redecorating the room with bold colors and stripes for some reason, or something I love, and just claiming those. There's a self-agency moving towards health. And then lastly, the angelic healing room was this huge circular room with a stairway that in the middle. This was the closest representation I could find to that. And in that angelic healing room, I pulled this. This is the first card I pulled for that. And this is actually my ex-husband. We're still friends, John. But it's a soul collage card I made for him with his energy. And that told me that I am deeply cared for by the angels. Like, it's just stable and steadily always there. And then this card was about the abundance of infinite wisdom. And the painting in the back is something I did based on Louise Hay's book. It's called I Am Loved and Lovable. I am valued and valuable. And I just, as a reminder that the angels bring that to me. And this card, I'm still not quite sure what it means, but I think there's just a strength in stealthiness. And I still haven't quite uncovered what that is. So if you know, let me know, or if you have thoughts. And then this card, when I first made it, I did not like it, and I didn't know why. And eventually, though, I realized that I was resenting her from being so happy. And when I finally figured that out, it changed my relationship with this card. And I actually do, I have a little mister bottle now that has this lavender water in it. And during the day, I'll just spray it in the air and let the drops come down on me. And that's what I am recreating with this card, that light is coming down, light from source is coming down, and to remind myself to be happy. And then again, in the angelic healing or community room, it's about absurdity and Alice in Wonderland and being curious and being silly. And then finally, the vows room. If any of you have ever seen Little Dorrit, the most recent version of it with Claire Foy, this is a scene from it, which is amazing. And I feel like this sometimes, not only with vows unseen but felt, but also just my day-to-day life feels so overwhelming. So the one card I pulled for this was a card I made a long time ago, and it's trying to make order in the chaos, and that you can't make all the chaos go away, but you could find a calm stillness in a little bit of the organization of it, and to be gentle with yourself. So that's it in a nutshell, a long nutshell. So if you're still here, thank you. And if you have questions, you're always welcome to write something in the comments. And what I'll do is post my email if you have any questions. The program that I run off and on, and the workshops are under the moniker of Place of Our Own, but we, it could be one workshop, one day to 6 months, because we even, yeah, you can look at my other videos. There's a whole thing for that. There's a Place of Her Own channel, which I'll link to at the bottom. Anyway, thank you for listening. I'm still working on this as a workshop. Thanks. Bye.